This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 180, Healthcare Content Marketing Spotlight, Patient Stories. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is June 23rd, 2016. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. So how do you like our new intro music? If you've been following the saga, I had to wipe my hard drive, so I had to rebuild the files for this podcast, and figured while I was at it, I would choose some new intro and outro music. Now, I totally stressed over this decision because I have to say, when I'm presented with too many choices, I do not do well. So I put it up till the very last minute. And then just yesterday, I got a moment of tremendous inspiration. I happened to see an article, and it was about 1990s TV shows and the theme songs or the theme music. And the writer of this article, his perspective was, forget Friends, forget Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Hands down, best theme music for a 90s TV show was that for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I said, oh my God, that's it. That is it. I love Buffy. I love that wonderful theme music by Nerf Herder. So I let that serve as my inspiration for choosing the new theme music. So I hope you like it too, because we're going to be living with it for a while. Okay, just a reminder, this podcast is available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and now Google Play Music. So if you like what you hear, please feel free to click on over and subscribe so you can get every single episode delivered directly to your happy little ears. I also want to invite you to subscribe to our weekly tip emails. Yes, every Friday we send out a quick content marketing tip, plus links to our weekly video and the weekly blog post, as well as to this podcast. To subscribe, just go to resonancetips.com. Also, want to give you an update on the book. Yes, it's many months in the making, but we are finally making progress. Earlier this week, I shared some cover design options on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and asked people to chime in on that. And the manuscript is in the layout process, and the goal is to open up for pre-orders on July 1st. So real soon now, folks. Very, very exciting. And of course, as soon as that page is available and the book is up for pre-order, we've got some really juicy bonuses to go along with that. I promise I will share all that information with you. Okay, last week we continued our month-long focus on healthcare by putting a spotlight on a vital piece of healthcare content, and that is the patient guide. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed. Today we are back in the healthcare industry, our topic for the month, and we are putting a spotlight on another vital element of your healthcare content, and that is your patient stories. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Big announcement in the social media world last week. Microsoft announced that it had purchased LinkedIn for $26.2 billion. Now, this announcement came as a total surprise. I had not heard any rumblings about such a thing, and it has gotten some mixed reviews from the business community about how this is going to play out and what it means for LinkedIn users. So Here's my perspective. LinkedIn's leadership has been known for some very sound decision making. I mean, most recently they bought lynda.com in just a brilliant move to become that professional content, that professional hub for people in business. And but that said, the platform is not perfect. It's been facing some challenges lately, especially in the groups. They are in need of an overhaul, and publishing is kind of getting out of hand as well. So Microsoft, if you look at the articles and the press releases, they're saying everything they're supposed to say. Yes, we value the LinkedIn community. We're just going to make it better. And it might be that they will. Microsoft brings with it a tremendous amount of assets. Remember, they own Skype. They are, of course, their Outlook is a Microsoft product. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. It might turn LinkedIn into kind of an internal collaboration piece if that's the decision they try to go. So as for what it means to us marketers, too soon to tell, folks. We don't know. We have no idea what they have planned. They're being very tight-lipped on any plans for LinkedIn. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see how this shakes out. Microsoft, a lot of smart people over there, but they've made some missteps as well. So let's hope that the LinkedIn we know and love will continue to be just that and maybe even better. Okay, some news out of Twitter. Twitter has deepened the integration of Periscope by embedding a live button into the Twitter native mobile app. So you no longer have to juggle between Twitter and Periscope for leveraging that live video function. If you go to your Twitter mobile app and click on the tweet button, if you tap on that, one of the options will be, I believe it just says live, and it has a little Periscope icon right there. So, interesting. We've had a lot of news out of Twitter over the last few weeks. I know Twitter is kind of struggling to remain relevant, especially with Facebook Live gaining so much attention and so much traction, just growing at a ridiculous pace. And Twitter is trying to make up for lost time and lost leverage. So we will see if this helps. I still love Twitter. It's still still my favorite platform. Well, not my favorite platform. LinkedIn is my favorite platform. But, let's hope that they can keep innovating and not just play catch up, but keep innovating and continue to be the network we all know and love. Okay, our content hit of the week is a post called How to Write Deadlines. Listen to me. How to write headlines. See, I've got the book on the brain. I'm thinking deadlines. How to write headlines that drive traffic, shares, and search results. This is a post by Nathan Ellering on the CoSchedule blog. Now, writing optimized headlines is one of those things for which I constantly need a refresher because, I put my heart and soul into writing a post and then it's like time to slap a headline on it. And I do not do justice to that process. I just kind of put something together that basically says what the reader's going to get. And the reason I like this one, there are tons of posts out there. If you Google how to write a great headline, you will find probably over 1 million hits. But this is one that actually goes into the science of it and looks at what actually works. And then as an added bonus, he gives you a link to CoSchedule's free headline analyzer tool. So really cool, simple little tool. You plug in your headline and it gives you a score. I think it's from 1 to 100, and then gives you suggestions on how to improve it. Really, really handy little tool. So if you're looking to drive more traffic with your headlines, I know I am, I recommend you check out this post, and I will, of course, provide the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's newsfeed. If you run across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please tweet it to me at Resonance CONT, Resonance Content with the ENT lopped off, so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Healthcare Content Marketing Spotlight, Patient Stories. All this month, we have been focusing on content marketing for the healthcare industry. Now, if you are not in the healthcare industry, I do encourage you to stick around because a lot of the insights we're going to be sharing are very, very easy to leverage in other industries. So when I talk about patient stories, think customer stories or case studies or success stories. It's all pretty much the same thing. So why the focus on healthcare this month? Quite frankly, it's because y'all told me you'd need it. My friends in healthcare have told me they need some help when it comes to content marketing. So we divided an entire month to answering those questions. And today I want to focus on your patient stories. Now, I see 3 main missteps that healthcare organizations make. And for right now, I'm going to be talking about like hospitals and physician practices, the actual practitioners. The first misstep that I see is not doing patient stories. You go to their website and you see the standard brochure type stuff, and there are no patient stories to be found. You look on their social media, no patient stories to be found. So the first misstep that I see is not doing them. And I get it. These folks are busy. If a practice is large enough to have a marketing director, that person is just running around with her hair on fire 5 days a week, if not 7 days a week. And, it does take time to put these stories together. So I really get that it's a challenge to make time to work on them. The second misstep that I see among organizations who do patient stories is that they make them too clinical. It's they get into way too much detail on the diagnosis, the treatment approach, the technology, the chemistry, whatever the science was that was behind this patient story. They get way too wrapped up in that clinical, and that's usually. Docs love you guys, but I can always tell a patient story that's been written by a doctor because we love you guys, but doctors, what they do is they focus on the clinical side of things. So that's the second misstep that I see. And the third step is that they stop short of the final end result for the patient. What did this mean for the patient beyond, putting in the heart valve or doing the knee replacement? What did it mean for the patient? Because those end results, those are going to be the ones that are relatable. And I'm going to show you an example here in just a few minutes. So the third mistake that I see is that they don't carry it all the way through and talk about the end result for the patient. So before I get started on this process for creating successful patient stories, I do want to spend a moment talking about regulatory issues and patient privacy. Now, for our international audience, let me explain. We have here in the States a regulation called HIPAA, HIPAA, which has to do with patient privacy. Now, I am not an attorney. I am in no way an expert on any of this, but it basically lays out what patient information is confidential and what is not. So. And a lot of healthcare organizations, they just see HIPAA as a complete roadblock. They say, oh, well, this regulation is in place. We can't share patient stories, period. And that is not the case. From my perspective, again, check with your attorney, your legal department to get the true 411. Don't go by my word. But if you get a patient's permission in writing to share their story and their photograph, it's just the same as if they were appearing in a commercial for you and telling their story in a 30-second TV spot. It's no different, again, from my perspective, from sharing their story that goes into a blog post or an article on your website. So if you have been looking at those regulations as a roadblock, see what you can do. Talk to your attorney, talk to your legal team, and see what you can do to share those patient stories because they are so powerful. These are stories that people can relate to. And remember, connecting with people is all about emotion, and showing them an actual story of an actual person who went through something and whom you were able to help can just forge a tremendously powerful emotional connection that is going to form the bedrock of your relationship. So that is my rant on regulatory issues. So let's look at the process for creating successful patient story. Step one is you want to choose your themes. So if you are working for a large hospital system that has dozens of different departments, focusing on the areas that you want to promote it takes some strategic thinking. What is the hospital known for? And then so you want to share some patient stories in those areas where you are well known, and then you also want to share some for which you might not be known. You may be very well known for oncology, but not so much for cardiology. So you want to make sure those patient stories cover the spectrum of departments that you want to promote. Ideally, you want to promote every department. Eventually, that might take a while if you have a large system, but focus on those areas that you want to promote. Step two, of course, would be choosing the patients, and that's going to take some internal research. So if you're working on a marketing team, again, for a hospital system or even a large multi-location physician practice, you're going to want to walk around and do some research. Talk to people and say, okay, we are promoting, cardiology, or even more specific, we're talking about LVADs this month, left ventricular assist devices, if my memory serves from my work with healthcare with the hospital. So, and asking them, do you have a great patient story of a patient who people can really relate to, who might have had a particularly difficult situation that you were able to alleviate? And you remember that practitioners are in the business of practice. They are not marketers, so it might not be right there. Oh yeah, off the top of my head, I can name 5 people. It might take a little prompting and a little help on your end to help them think of those patient cases. So once you get those patients designated for your patient stories, you of course want to get the paperwork signed. They need to authorize you to share their story and their photograph. Again, talk to your legal department. And again, it's as if they were going to appear in a TV commercial and share their story there. It's really no different. At least I don't believe it's any different. Not a legal expert here. By the way, let me back up and say, from a calendar planning perspective, you don't need to do patient stories one at a time. You don't need to say, okay, this month we're going to do a story on maternity, and next month we're going to do this one. You can say, okay, we're going to devote the entire month of July to creating patient stories for the rest of the year, and just knock them out one after the other, and then you can publish those at any time. So just be aware of that. It doesn't have to be, starting from scratch. For this month, we're going to focus on this. You can batch those patient story projects into all together so that you're focused on it for a month, and then you've got everything set up for the rest of the year. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we've got our themes, we've got our patients, we've got the paperwork signed to keep the legal team happy. The next step is the patient interview. Now, patient interviews are an important part of this process, and we can't just we can. I don't want to say you can't, but they will go much more smoothly, and you will get a much better story if we approach them with some very, very thoughtful attention before we even pick up the phone. So I suggest that you have some questions prepared for the patient. I suggest that you might even want to have a pre-interview phone call with the patient to say, okay, we're going to take 20 minutes. I'm going to ask you about this and about this and about this, and to see if they have any questions about the story itself before you get that going. I have done that before with patients, and it's been a great opportunity, kind of an icebreaker, to introduce myself, to talk about what we're doing, to talk about the purpose of these stories, so that when we get to the interview, they will already feel comfortable with me. They know exactly what to expect, and that goes much more smoothly. So when you put together your questions for those patient interviews, you want to focus on 3 distinct stages. Number 1, what happened from the initial onset through the diagnosis, whether it was a cardiovascular problem, they noticed they were out of breath on their morning walks, or maybe it was a knee injury that they experience in a soccer game, whatever that initial onset through the diagnosis. So that's kind of the pre-treatment phase. The second phase is the treatment phase. So what made them seek out your organization, and then how did that treatment process go, and what was their perspective on that treatment process? And of course, phase 3 is going to be the outcomes. So after the treatment is done, what is the final outcome for the patient? And I mentioned this a few minutes ago, that a lot of organizations don't push all the way to those final outcomes. For example, let's say your patient story subject is a 31-year-old mother of 2 who had gastric bypass and lost 50 pounds. Now, many of those stories stop with, she lost 50 pounds and lived happily ever after. But what does that mean? What does that weight loss mean for her? It might mean she's able to run around and play with her kids. It might mean that losing this weight has alleviated her diabetes, which improved her overall health. It might mean that she has more energy to do the things that she wants to do. She might start, start running 10Ks or something like that, and feel really good about that. So make sure that you get to the final outcome. When you're talking to that patient, say, what does this mean for you? What is this alleviating this knee problem, or losing this weight, or having this having this problem taken care of, what does that mean for you at the end of the day? Make sure you get that, because it's those fun, it's the mom being able to run around with her kids. It's that kind of thing that creates that emotional connection. And emotional connection is what patient stories are all about. So got our patient interview down. Now we're going to write the story. And if you've done a really good job in your interview, writing the story is going to be pretty easy. You've already got your structure there. You've got your quotes there. Remember to include photos. You want to include photos of the patient, definitely an after photo, the patient being happy and healthy. If it makes sense, and if one is available, you could do a before photo. We want to steer clear of anything too graphic, because remember, this is going out to patients, not to clinicians or other healthcare professionals. They might see it, but it's really written for patients. Also, when you approach the writing, approach it as you would a newspaper or magazine article. A very journalistic style, very personal, very conversational. Again, we want to steer away from being too clinical and getting too wrapped up in those details. Step 6, of course, publish and promote like crazy. And remember, you don't have to just promote it once. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in our tip of the week. And then step 7, again, a step a lot of people miss, link to it on relevant pages in your website. So if you have a great story from your pediatric oncology ward, make sure that there's a link to that in the page of your website that talks about pediatric oncology, because people get the marketing pitch, for lack of a better word, on that page, but then they get to see, oh wow, here's a great patient story. I want to click that and read on, and that's going to it's going to add flesh and blood, quite honestly, to that marketing message that you are putting out there. So make sure that you are linking to those patient stories on relevant pages on your website. Okay, that is my quick and dirty take on the putting together successful patient stories for your healthcare organization. If you have any questions or want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you. And the best way to reach me is through the website resonancecontent.com. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to talk about linking to those patient stories regularly via social media. What we tend to do is we create a great patient story, we promote the living heck out of them when they're new and shiny, and then we kind of forget about them. They're there on our website, people can see them, but we don't think about them as content assets. But in reality, patient stories are evergreen content that can keep working for you over and over and over again. So as you look at your social media calendar, make sure you are putting those patient stories in a regular rotation. Maybe, if you build up a very sizable library, you might want to do once a week. You might want to link to a different patient story. Or you might want to align with a seasonal theme. For example, Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October, or the Go Red for Women campaign, which is the American Heart Association's awareness campaign on heart disease for women. That happens in February. So you might want to align your patient story sharing with those seasonal themes. So bottom line, look for opportunities to share and reshare those patient stories, and they will continue to work for you in making connections with your audience. Okay, campers, that's it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast, including our shiny new theme music. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play Music or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. Also, remember to sign up for our Tip of the Week emails at resonancetips.com, and be on the lookout for the pre-order page for my book coming out in, actually pre-order is going to start next month, so keep an eye out for that. As you know, I always like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Jim Rohn. He once said, quote, "Successful people do what unsuccessful people are not willing to do. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better." Unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.